Sure, yes, I see cameras, so we're making sure we had a quorum to call our meeting to order. So it is 9:02 a.m. It is Tuesday, September the 13th. Thank you all for being here for the meeting of the Zoning Ordinance Advisory Committee. Mr. Del Castillo, can we start with the roll call, please?
Certainly. Good morning. Mr. McGregor? I'll come back to you. Ms. Bagley?
Here.
Here. Mr. Bering? Here. Here. Commissioner Popkin? Not here. Mr. Reeves? Absent. Mr. McGregor? There he is. Perfect. Chair Hampton?
Present.
And Vice Chair Blair? Not here. Yeah, Mr. Hall?
Present.
Thank you. We've got quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Del Castillo. We do have a quorum, and with that, we'll start with our one discussion item for today.
We're gonna have quorum
Ms. Levy,
today?
good morning. Good morning, Mr. McGregor. We did see you. We saw a hand wave.
Can you guys hear me?
We can. Can
Good
you hear
morning.
us? Good morning. Good morning, Ms. Levy. Would you like to start with reading the item into the record in your briefing for today?
Yes, good morning, Madam Chair, and members of ZOAC and staff. This morning, I have Ashley Mitchell with me. She is the GIS manager for planning and urban design. And she will be also, after I make my brief presentation, she will give a test drive of an amazing GIS map that she has been able to create for us for phase 2 of the batch plant code amendment. So I will, did we read the item into the record? Would you like me to do that first? Or?
If you would, please, Ms. Levy. We have not read it into the record. Okay,
thank you. The item before us this morning is a discussion on DCA 212003, consideration of amending temporary concrete or asphalt batch plant uses, including but not limited to concrete or asphalt batching plant and industrial uses in the Dallas Development Code, Chapter 51 and 51A. Excuse me. I'll go ahead and share my screen. Can you see my screen yet?
Yes, we can.
We can see it.
Okay. It's out of the way. Okay. So again, the discussion this morning will be an update on the concrete or asphalt batching plants, phase 2 of the code amendment. And we will go over, and Ashley Mitchell will give a test drive or a little demo of the draft interactive map that she's been able to create for us. Sorry, there's a delay in the moving. So yeah, we'll just cover a little bit of the background and history, excuse me, the purpose of the code amendment. I know it's been some time since we've met. And again, an update and a revealing of the draft interactive map and then the next steps. So again, last year, toward the end of last year, November 12th, 2021, staff prepared a memo at the request of Councilmember Blackman, Chair of the Environment and Sustainable Committee, on strategies to effectively address batch plants. In the beginning of this year, staff prepared a memo on a phasing approach to address the batch plant zoning regulations. On February 10th, we presented recommendations for phase 1 of a two-phased approach. And then, of course, that went on to CPC. And then on March 24th of this year, City Council approved phase 1 of the concrete and asphalt batch plant code amendment.
Ms. Levy, there appears to be some sort of pop-up on your screen. It's right in the middle of your presentation here at City Hall. Are you able to see that?
No, ma'am, I do not.
Oh, it just popped away. I don't know if anyone online, but it is gone now. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm having trouble advancing the presentation for some reason. Okay, maybe that'll work now. Oh, I'm sorry. That was probably a reminder for the meeting. Maybe I don't know. I'm sorry, I didn't turn that off. So
No,
the purpose
thank you.
of the purpose of the batch plant code amendment. If you will recall, PUD initiated the zoning code amendment for the batch plants in support of the adopted comprehensive environmental and climate action plan CCAP goal of ensuring new industries are an appropriate distance away from neighborhoods. So again, one of the main purposes was to protect the sensitive land uses such as residences, parks, and schools, improve public health and air quality, and to provide the necessary appropriate locations for batch plant operations. We do recognize they are an important and necessary industry. So some of the actions that we took, again, we did the two-phased approach, and that was approved to go forward as a two-phased approach. And then phase 1, which was approved by council, was the short-term approach that we took, if you remember, to immediately address the lack of a public process for the batch plants by removing the administrative by right approvals that we had that was allowed by our code. And then we added the specific use permit SUP process that requires the public hearings for both CPC and City Council. So then we're at phase 2, and phase 2 was development of new regulations through a comprehensive review and public input, taking, approximately 4 to 6 months. That also included departmental coordination, legal considerations of implications on existing land uses, research of local and national cities regulations and best practices, input from the public, industry, and professional organizations, and coordination with state and federal jurisdictions. So, we basically, where we are now, we've done those. We've gone through that. Advancing, I don't know why. Okay, sorry. So again, we've basically taken these last several months to work on all these pieces. It is a very comprehensive effort, and do want to emphasize that, because we're not, although the draft regulations will come to you, and that's what you will be charged with, formulating and recommending on to CPC and City Council. There has been, very comprehensive review, as well as a lot of public input, and we do want to have some more public input. We've had internal departmental coordination with various departments through these last months, and still ongoing. We've developed an internal checklist that, of course, will be finalized once the regulations are in place. That will be at zoning application intake, and that will assist the planners and those reviewing the batch plants that come in for zoning, to check for the regulations, making sure that, the regulations that are going to be put in place can be met. They'll go through the map also. This interactive map will also be used as a great tool, not just to help us track these batch plants. And I'll go through, what's been built into this that Ashley's been able to create for us for analysis, but we'll use that for as part of the check of the zoning review. So it's going to be something that'll be put permanently in place to assist with, again, tracking the batch plants and just really utilizing that as a tool from start to finish. A very comprehensive effort. So like I said, we've had all of these public input meetings. We do want to have some more. The draft regulations have been or in the internal, going through being finalized in the internal departments with their coordination. And we would like to go ahead and meet with the industries and the public again one more time before we bring those before you. But onto the map. So this is a snapshot of the draft batch plant interactive map. As you can see on this one, it's by council district. There's several different layers that you can pull, for different analysis and views, and Ashley will go through that shortly. But this is basically showing the different batch plants: temporary concrete, permanent concrete, temporary asphalt, permanent asphalt by SUP, permanent concrete by SUP, and then again, all the council districts. This is just one layer, and then with the batch plants. And then this is another snapshot of IM and IR zoning districts. The purple color is the IR district zoning, and IM is the red color. I'm going through this because these different layers were put into this system so that we can get a good analysis, because again, there's zoning district implications for where these locate, and I think this is a great spatial tool for us to see just what that does. You can see that IR is has quite a bit of zoning, and you can see where it's concentrated to a large degree, which will make sense when you see the batch plants also, and where those are concentrated. But so this was put into the system as well for analysis purposes. And then also this shows just some data that was taken from it that's built into the GIS system with distances from sensitive land uses. And again, when we met with the public, when we had our meetings, of course, there was quite a bit of discussion on distances from these sensitive land uses. And so it was, distances from the batch plants to the nearest residence. That was of big interest. Distance to residential zoning districts, public schools, public parks. And so I just put some of the numbers. And again, I just want to emphasize a couple of things. The map is draft still. We know that, it came from a lot of different data sources. At some point we'll have one data set in the city, and we'll have a system that allows us to basically operate like a true database, where you have one record, housed in one location, and all of those records, whatever happens to that parcel or that project, goes as a historical record into that system. But we don't have that right now. So, we cleaned up the data as best we can. We are still wanting to hear if anyone knows of any batch plants that are not on here, or, like I said, our information's only as good as what we've had. So we've, been on the ground and went out to also visit several. So, but again, so we're asking for help. If anyone knows any information, or, just help us to continue to edit. But the other thing is the distances. The distances right now Ashley has from data point to data point. So it still gives us a really close indication, but she is working on having the distances from property line of the batch plants to property line of public park, public school, residential zoning district. And then it would be property line of the batch plant to nearest point of a residence. But again, for now, it's point to point. So permanent batch plants that are operational right now that are meeting or exceeding 1,500 feet from these distances, nearest residence, basically it's at 70%. Most of them do handily meet those distances. And then residential zoning district, 82%, public school, public park, they, 100%, they handily meet and exceed those, that distance. So that's just kind of a point of reference to give you for the batch plants to, that was, one point of analysis. And I will just add that the temporary batch plants, of course, because they're in all zoning districts and because the way zoning, you'll have one zoning district right, excuse me, immediately adjacent to a residential zoning district, obviously, the distance could be 0 in many cases to a residence. Or I'm sorry, a residential zoning district, and then, as close as 73 feet or so to an actual residence. Typically, a lot of times they'll be further away from of course, a park or a school, but that's just one thing to keep in mind, because they typically will go on a site that they're actually serving with that infrastructure. The distances are going to be completely different than what they are for a permanent batch plant. And still not advancing. I'm sorry. Okay. And then I just put this up here because another tool that is into the database right now is if you know of an address of a batch plant, you can do a search and see if it's on the map. So this was just kind of showing that we have a lot of known addresses for batch plants, but this was just one example that you can do that. So next steps before I turn this over to Ashley. Again, we want to meet with the industry and public again one more time when we have the draft regulations finalized. We anticipate having those meetings this month and early October if necessary, and then anticipate bringing that draft, or excuse me, the ZOAC recommendation before you for phase 2 in October, and then of course bringing ZOAC's recommendation on to CPC in November, and then to council for final action in December. If not before. I mean, if we can, if we can get to them and have them in the same month like we did phase 1, then all the better. So if phase 2 is not approved, the temporary and permanent batch plans will be required by SUP, all as they are right now, without uniform conditions and development standards. So that's what we're trying to accomplish with phase 2. And with that, if you have any questions, I'm open for questions. I don't know, Madam Chair, if you would like to go through questions now, or if you would like me to turn this over to Ashley to give us a demo of this fantastic map. She's done incredible. It's an incredible amount of work, and very happy to showcase what she's been able to do for us.
Well, thank you, Ms. Levy, for the presentation. Maybe we'll pause and just see if there are any initial questions from the members. Anyone online? So I'm going to ask two just very general questions that I think you will likely cover, but just so that we can have those for context. First, you mentioned that the map, and I know we're going to see the map. Will that be available on the concrete and asphalt batch plant website for folks to utilize? I think you mentioned that you're going to ask both for the public and interested stakeholders to help identify locations that may not be shown. Could you speak to how you intend to make this available to the public?
Thank you. That's a great question. It is a draft right now, and of course, it's housed in GIS, and Ashley can give some permissions. We will not be able to put it on the website right now, because again, it is draft. It's not complete, and ultimately it will be an internal. There'll be two interfaces, I guess you could say, and Ashley could explain this much more technically and help answer. But there'll be an internal site that we will use. Ultimately, there will be, or we think there will be. We still need to have these discussions. There's a lot of discussion we need to have still on who maintains it, where it's housed, and who will have actual permissions to maintain it. But we anticipate there will be a public GIS interface, just like we have our zoning map and other features online. We anticipate that, but we're not sure. We have to have those discussions. So, with that, if
Well, I guess maybe another way to approach it. I saw that you had an output of the map in your presentation. Would
Correct.
that be available just as a static document, maybe with the addresses, just as a list, so that it could be a tool for the public to reference?
Yes, that's a great point. Yes, we could do that, and of course, that will go on the website, the presentation. And Ashley is working right now to also to create the actual list of addresses. She'll need to clean it up, of course. And I think if we can post that or add that with it, then we could do that. Yeah, we could definitely work something out to do that. And then maybe, if any of the members, you may be able to get permissions. I don't know. She may be able to do that, but it's just, there's only so many that she can give access and permissions to.
Understood. And you covered actually my other question, which was to ask if this presentation will be posted on the website so that we'll have it available. There's a lot of information in here that I was trying to capture. So
Correct.
So thank you for that.
Yes, and again, I'll just say again, reiterating, it is draft, and we're not saying that's the that's the numbers as we know it.
Understood.
I'll put it that way.
Thank
legal.
You. All right. So
the
before
numbers of the legal ones that we know of.
And we'll let the city attorney weigh in on any considerations that we need to have. So before we move to the map, I'll look around one more time. Any questions? See none here. Those online, I can see Mr. McGregor and Mr. Bering, Ms. Bagley. All right, we'll move to the map. I do want to note for the record that Commissioner Blair joined us at 9:08 a.m. and thank you for being here this morning, Commissioner Blair. So Ms. Mitchell, we will move to the map.
My audio.
We can hear you now. We can see the map on the screen, and I believe we heard you.
Ashley, did you
Ms.
want
Mitchell,
me
if you're,
Oh, I'm sorry.
yeah, thank you, Ms. Levy. That's what I was going to say. We couldn't hear anyone if anyone was speaking.
Yes. Ashley, did you want me to kind of narrate or, or just maybe, was gonna maybe direct you to show some certain layers and information on here. And then if there's certain things, after that they maybe want to see, we can do that. Does that sound good? I'm wondering if she's trying to unmute. You do have, I notice you have to unmute from over in the
There we
panelist.
go.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, you can't do it at the
yeah, that would
bottom.
actually, that would work great. Yeah, you can narrate and I'll drive.
Okay. So again, Ashley Mitchell in GIS has created this great interactive map. That'll be a great tool for us. And I think what's showing right now, Ashley, it looks like the council district boundaries and maybe even some of the planning, planning districts are on. Yes. So Ashley's pulled up the different layers. Maybe take off the planning service areas real quick.
There we go. Okay.
And then maybe can you pull up take the layer screen off and turn on the legend real quickly so they can see the different.
Sure.
Yes. Okay. And I had a snapshot of that, but again, that just shows the different colors. And I don't know if you can make this any bigger, but if there's any way to make it full screen maybe, or
yes.
okay. Okay.
Let me see if I can make this. Well, I can't make this any bigger, but I can pull up a different map
Right.
that will show the same info. Yeah, we can work with the size on this screen. We don't have to make all the dashboard elements take up 50% of the page. So we can play with the visual some on this.
Okay. So we can move it around too, but if you would, let's well, let me tell them what else is on here. Okay, so you've got the council district boundaries and the colors in the legend. We've got the categories, temporary, permanent, whether it's by SUP or not. And then on the right, it's batch plants by operational status. And hopefully they can see that. You have again, it's different color codes and some numbers next to it for how many permanent asphalt by SUP plants you have, how many permanent concrete by SUP, temporary asphalt, and then temporary concrete. And there's numbers, and then you have the pie charts, which gives you a breakdown of the percentages of. And again, these are just the ones that are operational plants. And then, so you have the percentages of, no, I'm sorry, it's actually two different things. It's all of them, and the percentages of how many are temporary concrete, and that's what, almost 80%. Permanent asphalt by SUPs, 2.41%. So again, you could see the majority, of course, is temporary concrete. And then you have permanent concrete that was, I guess, not by SUP, and then 12%, and then permanent concrete by SUP represents 6%. So again, just kind of breakdowns of the different types, and then total batch plants, we're showing 88. Operational batch plans 23, and then you have the last 3 years, 5 years, and 10 years that we wanted in here. I know that number was mentioned, or those years were mentioned often, so It gives you the breakdown of those. And then the pie chart all the way on the right, you'll notice, and that's for operational. So yes, 23 are operational. Again, it's just showing that number. No, 42. And then unknown, I'll explain that. It's showing 23. So in our data set, it goes back, some of the data goes back from 1978, I believe. And there are a series of records, and 23 actually, that did not have addresses. They just had, general cross-section locations. So we were not able to map those. So what Ashley did, she mapped those just using the City Hall address, basically, just to give it had to have some address in order to calculate numbers and that type of thing. So that's what that represents. We're hopeful, and maybe we remove those at some point, but that's kind of a historical record keeping, and that goes into that total number of the batch plants. That's just historically what we know of that we've had, basically, that went through the process. So I think that explains that. Ashley, if you would, let's go ahead and show them a batch plant.
Okay.
Maybe, yeah, just click on one to show them, how it works, basically, and
Okay.
what information you get. Yeah, and hopefully they
Sure.
can see that.
Yeah, I click. You click on the dot, and sometimes there's some other pop-ups that come through. Because it's behind a council district, and let's see here.
So this one.
So it gives
Yes.
some various information as to the number of, let's see, when it was applied for, when it was approved, when it passed inspection, and then these other numbers that show 3 years, 5 years, or 10 years. That's kind of a cumulative. So if it's been issued in the last 3 years, then it's also been issued in the last 5 and the last 10. So those numbers down at the bottom of the dashboard are they are cumulative in nature. Moving back over, so I'm jumping around a little bit this morning. Looking at, it'll tell us whether it's temporary or permanent, what type it is. If it's inside of a zoning district, it'll give us the zoning district, the SUP number associated with the plant, if applicable. And then we've got a couple of things that we've measured. It's the distance to the nearest park, gives us the park name, distance to the nearest residence in feet. So it's like a point-to-point measurement right there. Distance to the closest homeowner association. That's from the measurement from that point to the central point of a HOA polygon. Also gives us the name of the closest school, distance. So it's got most of our distances in there measured that we need.
Yeah, and I think that's what's so that's the best feature. I think one of the best features for us, as far as analysis, that you were asked to put in there, and I love the way you did that, because it's already in there, and that's amazing, because I kind of thought we would have to measure it, or as we pulled one up, or get a buffer or something. It's all already there, and so I think it's an extremely powerful tool for us. Okay, so if you would, Ashley, can you show them, I guess, searching on, let's say they, they can't, they know of a batch plant,
Okay.
they've got the address, they've seen one on the ground, and they want to check they want to check it in here. So I guess let's go ahead and try that 2861 South Beltline, maybe.
Okay, and it'll try to autocorrect it for you or autocomplete it. Belt line. Okay. So you'll see a couple of suggestions pop up. We want the one in Dallas. And it looks like there's a batch plant there. You can just on it. There we go. Sometimes when you click it and it's not showing up, there's a 1 of 3, so there's other map elements being displayed, and you'll just have to click through it until you get what you're looking for. I need to go back and fix that, but that wasn't really readily apparent until now that could be an issue. Let's see what else there is. So that's the ability to search by batch plant, or I'm sorry, by address for a batch plant.
Okay, and then I'm trying to think. Actually, if you would, let's go ahead and maybe go ahead and put the IM and IR zoning district layer on, and then we'll kind of move around a little bit in some of those areas.
Okay.
Just to show, with the batch plants, because you won't be able to see the batch plants with that layer until you actually get close enough.
There we go.
To those. So like council district. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, you're in the right place. Council District 6, as we know, has quite a number of batch plants in that area. I want to say there's like 31 or something, but and it's a lot of that's explained because you have a lot of IM and IR zoning. So so Ashley, if you would, and I think I saw, so now it looks a little different. The majority of the batch plants, I think, are mainly in IM, but we do have some in IR. And I think that's kind of part of what I want to bring out as well, because we are looking at the zoning districts, the industrial zoning districts.
Ms. Levy or Ashley, could you maybe select one of the ones that's not in the IM or the IR?
Sure. There's one right here that is on Joe Field Road, and it is in neither. It's in a PD district, so it's in PD 498. But this one sits in neither IM or IR.
Yes, and that's by SUP, and if I'm not mistaken, I think they're going through a review right now of their current SUP, and maybe it already has, and I'm trying to remember, but that is one that is by SUP. It's a little different.
SUP 1530.
Okay, and I want to pause maybe for members to have a question. I have a few questions, but I think others may as well. And I will say I'm fascinated to dig into this map a little bit more.
Oh, thank you.
So, members online? All right, I'm seeing shaking heads. So, question. If we're able to get an output list, presumably it will be by location as the way to reference this. Can it include the zoning district and because you've already got them by type?
Yes,
to
we can
include
do that.
Whether it's an SUP. Okay. And then again, I think that's one of the things many of us are probably going to try to understand is how many do we have? How many are permanent? what are the time frame associated with them? That was one of our big discussion points relative to phase one. So that would be helpful to have that.
And if they have an SUP, if they expire, what's the process of remediating the?
And then there's a follow-up question. And again, Ms. Levy, this may get a little bit back to the conditions, but when a batch plant, if it is by SUP, the SUP is at the end of its period, how the land is being restored. I'm guessing that will be within the conditions that are proposed. I know that was a discussion point, but if you could address that when this comes
Yes.
back to us. Oh,
Yes,
and
thank
Commissioner
you.
Blair, excuse me,
Absolutely.
Vice Chair
The
Blair
draft-
now has a follow-up.
So, Ms. Levy, my question is this: when you have a temporary, let's start with temporary, or one with a SUP, whether it's and it has a permanent SUP, but it's inactive. How will there be a process to ensure that SUP is closed out and no one else can come back in and use that as a batch plant without going through the process? That's one first question.
Yeah, that is one discussion point. I honestly I think that it's something we should look at and can look at too, because we know that we do have a few batch plants that are no longer active. You're right, and they are on this map as well. I don't think the SUP should just sit out there, forever. I think, but that's something we need to discuss with the attorney as well. But, revoking the SUPs or if, I don't know if that's a process that we have to go through. That's something we'll have to discuss with the attorneys, or if when they expire, they could just become void. I think there's a process because there is one plant that is in here. I'm trying to remember the address. But anyway, the CO was voided is what it was called in the system. I saw the CO was voided. Council did not choose to have the SUP renewed. So that's the status. That's the status it is right now. And I think the SUP number though may still be out there. So we do need to clarify that, whether or not we actually have to then go revoke that SUP, or if it's just null and void and we don't have to worry about it anymore. That is a discussion for the attorneys. That's a great
so
question.
I know of a batch plant that was operational last year if you go to District 8, Dowdy Ferry and I-20. I don't know the exact address, but it's District 8, Dowdy Ferry, just north of I-20. I don't know if it's going to come up on your map, but I don't know if it was, I believe it was a permanent batch plant. I don't remember if it had an SUP or it was just by right or whatever you want to call it. And it's no longer operational. They have abandoned the site. So in that particular instance, will the map still show that location? And will it show that if it's got a SUP that has expired, it was a SUP expired, it was not renewed, can our identification or in our process identify how to terminate that use on that particular site and how to hold the business owner responsible for the remediation of the land to put it back to something that is that's usable?
Okay.
And I know that was a loaded question.
Right. Okay. So let's break it down. Yes, it will, if we know of it, it will show on the map. We do have some already. And I think it should stay in there for historical purposes. And because again, the goal in the plan is to use this as a tool going forward. So, you know, we get it cleaned up the best that we can. Now, you know, we still may be getting new information all the time, but this is something that is ongoing as a tool in the future. And it already does have information in there, like you mentioned, and we'll definitely make sure that we have expired status, or like the one I saw, and I'm not sure if it was on Manila, but I'm thinking it was, where the CO was called voided. We definitely want that information in there. It can help us to be aware of those locations, if you will, in our record keeping. As far as going back on a site that's already been vacated, and maybe now we'll have new draft regulations that require restoration and remediation. Well, that's another attorney question that we'll have to see if, you know, if we're able to, or if we are going to, ultimately, if you're going to recommend that, you know, those sites be remediated or restored now. Because, and again, we're kind of going back, and, you know, or we're going to just go forward with the new ones and have them be responsible. And that's an attorney question, and it's also a decision, you know, that'll have to be made ultimately.
Yes, Lori, this is Brian King, City Attorney's Office. In reference to the inactive, goes to Vice Chair Blair's question as well. In reference to the SUP for automatic renewal, it's based on the applicant. So if the applicant fails to file an application to auto renew, then that SUP for that batch plan is considered to be ineligible for automatic renewal. So with that being said, when they're ineligible for automatic renewal, City Council may reinstate their SUP eligibility to automatic renew, but of course they will have to go to City Council as opposed to going through the usual SUP process. So in short, an inactive batch plant that has an SUP that failed to timely file an application to auto renew is deemed not to have that SUP.
But okay, so Mr. King, let me just add a layer onto that. So here's a scenario that maybe we need to consider is you have a batch plant. A batch plant has auto renewal, and their auto renewal, it doesn't terminate for a couple of years. But that batch plant leaves the business, leaves that address, but that SUP is still active and still usable. So what happens if someone else comes in and just decides, okay, I know that this SUP is here for a batch plant, and just starts using it? It doesn't have to go through a process. The auto renewal is not there. What processes and procedures can we look at to say, no, that batch plant, that new user or owner has to go through the process of seeing, one, if we want them as a business at that location, and two, do they automatically get to go through the auto renewal for the old user?
So to the second question, no, since they weren't the initial applicant. And for the first question, as Lori mentioned, we'll have to, go and help out with the draft to actually have that, because right now it's silent. The code is silent on that, as far as if non-applicant comes and uses that batch plant, because I want to make sure I understand the question. So the applicant abandons the batch plant and then the non-applicant comes in to use it.
So I own this batch plant. I've been operating this batch plant for decades, years, whatever. And I have an auto renewal that's the 10-year auto renewal I'm within year 6 of that 10-year. So I have 4 more years before my auto renewal has to be renewed. I leave, I close business, I no longer exist, but I sell the location to someone else, to Mr. Hall here, who I'm bringing you into my fricassee, and I sell it to Mr. Hall here, and Mr. Hall knows that I have a SUP and I can do a batch plan. He's not necessarily as efficient and proficient in the land use as I was. And sorry, Mr. Hall. And so he comes in and he starts using the land inappropriately as a batch plant, and no one knows about it because there's no process to say that once you shut down, you have to close out that SUP, and then we don't know who he is until either code gets involved or it's time to do the auto renewal, and all of a sudden we have a new user we didn't know anything about. So legally, how do we manage to that? And then Ms. Levy, what processes can we put in place so that when we answer the legal questions, we have a process that identifies how to manage to the land use as it moves forward?
Okay, Brian King, the City Attorney's Office. So I will get back to you on that question, because I want to make sure that if there's not a process available now with our code, that we'll know how to address it with Lori's group, and that will help us out to not give you guys any, wrong direction.
And if I may ask one follow-up on that, Mr. King, my understanding is that an SUP as a land use goes with the land. And so that while there may be a new operator and a new certificate of occupancy may be required, that the SUP does not terminate simply because the original applicant is no longer the operator.
Yes, that's
and
correct.
If you could please address that, because I think one of the things we're trying to understand is, how, to Vice Chair Blair's example, if there is a change in ownership, how that is reviewed by staff, and if we, have a change in circumstances, how that's evaluated. If you could, in your evaluation, if you would include that, it would be helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. King.
We
Mr.
will. I think,
Yeah.
I'm thinking right now that the new operator is supposed to get a new CO. But still, that's a great question. And, what if they don't? Or how do you, reduce the chances of that happening? To me, if the SUP stays there, and is not revoked, maybe, to me, I think you run more of a risk of having that happen. But again, to the point of the ones that are still active, I think, I think that's part of enforcement, honestly, because if they are required to get a new CO and they don't, then that's an enforcement issue, basically.
Commissioner Blair, Vice Chair Blair.
Lori, today is a Lori day. A Lori and a Lori. Hi, Lori. So here's my next thought. So if we have a user, a property user who no longer is a batch plant user, and I guess it goes back to, do we let batch plants have permanent SUPs, or if we deny permanent SUPs, and they're ready to leave the site, will the recommendation that you bring forward provides for the remediation of the land back to a use that it was? So if you have a batch plant that is surrounded by residential uses, and for whatever reason it was allowed to operate for an extended period of time, the land is scarred and it's not usable for anything other than a use, a IRIM use that's all surrounded by residential, which is non-compatible uses. How do we get that land back to a use for residential service? And will we identify a process that says up front that if you're going to be a batch plant, you are responsible for the appropriateness of use of land, and you are responsible to bring the land back to the use it was when you first started your business?
Absolutely. That is something that we're looking at. That was something that was brought up by yourself, as as well as others as part of the public input. And there were quite a few of those sites out there. It's definitely an issue. And we are trying to address environmental issues as part of CCAP, and a big part of this is to have the goal to have the land uses in the appropriate locations with respect to and protection of the sensitive land uses. But CCAP is all about the environmental land as well. So I absolutely think it's something that has to be addressed.
Thank you, Ms. Levy. Members online, any questions? Okay, so Ms. Levy, I'm going to ask this, and again, I think this is going to be in your upcoming draft conditions, but just wanted to, I was going back through my notes on our last discussion on this. So would you confirm that the conditions are going to address criteria for the SUP that may include minimum size, spacing between the uses, or between the batch plants, distances from sensitive land uses, and other environmental considerations?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And then is there going to be a recommendation for a time period for the SUPs? Or is that something that staff is evaluating?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And then, and this is somewhat following up on Vice Chair Blair's question, is that how to address existing and or permanent batch plants or concrete or asphalt batch plants as a part of, particularly where they may no longer be compatible with the surrounding uses. Is that something that will be included in our upcoming briefing?
Yes, it will.
Thank you. And then final question, and I don't know how you want to address this, but there was a question about what is the criteria for the granting of an SUP? I think we know what our general SUP criteria is, but are there any specific considerations that will be recommended relative to concrete and asphalt batch plants?
Yes.
Okay. All right, those are my high level. And then I think part of today's discussion, one thing that I wanted to ask in the map, is there a category for the no longer active or vacated locations? I think I heard you say that as something to add, but I wanted to confirm I heard that correctly.
Let me make sure I understand. We do have the ones that are vacated, no longer active on the map, the ones we know of. But I think, are you asking also that we see that mapped as a category as well, or just that it's in there under the information?
It likely just as information, because I think one of the things we're hearing is that there's evidence where, the use may be there, and for all appearances, someone would think it was active, but to understand and be able to track that information may be helpful.
Yes, and actually, I guess that's one layer we didn't get to. But just like our other zoning maps, there is a layer for an aerial as well. So you can actually put that layer on it and see, if there's something on the land, or if it's vacant, or you can kind of tell a lot of times if it's operational just by looking at the aerial view. So I did want to mention that as well. But yes, it is in the information.
Okay, thank you. And then I think we just had a long conversation about changes of owners and operators, and we'll look forward to that coming back as well. So I don't
Yes.
think there's any action for us today. This is going to be coming back to us, you mentioned, in October. And so I think if there's no other comments or direction for staff, we can likely close this item. I will note we do not have any registered speakers on this item, but we were contacted by a member of the public. Mr. Del Castillo, are they online? Do we know if they wanted to make any comments today? Okay. So perhaps if our member of the public wanted to send something in the chat, we will take a quick look at that before we move to our other discussion, which is approval of our minutes. We'll just pause for 30 seconds to give them a chance to let us know.
Give me one moment, and I'm going to move them over as panelists so that they can speak.
Thank you, Mr. King. And they may have just been listening in for information, but.
Mr. Bowers, would you like to speak, sir?
No, thank you.
Well, thank you for being with us today. So with that, we have our minutes from the August 30th meeting. Is there a motion to approve? Or I guess first, are there any comments or corrections? None were submitted. So seeing none, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. McGregor. Second from Ms. Bagley. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, minutes are adopted as submitted. And we have no other items on our agenda today. Thank you, Ms. Levy, Mr. King, Mr. Del Castillo, all of our members today. Thank you for being with us. It is 10:06 a.m. and we are adjourned. Have a good morning, everyone.
Thank you.